Russia's President Vladimir Putin has addressed the nation after Wagner mercenary forces claimed control of military sites in Rostov-on-Don. He described the move as treason and said decisive action will be taken.
We will defend our country, we will defend our nation, we will defend our citizens against the threats we face today. Some people are trying to use their interests against our country. We need to make sure that we are fighting in Ukraine for the sake of our country and be sure the traitors must not be there. A lot of people have sacrificed their lives for Russia, and those that are trying to sow rebellion and create chaos will fail ultimately.
Well, Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin accuses Russia's military leaders of ordering airstrikes, which killed thousands of his men. He's vowing to seek what he calls justice for the dead. Michael Apple has the latest.
This video appears to show Wagner forces and their leader Yevgeny Prigozhin entering military headquarters in Rostov. In a subsequent video, he is seated between senior commanders, one of whom had earlier broadcast a video urging Prigozhin to reconsider his rebellion order. The mercenary boss says his men control important sites in the city.
We are in the headquarters. It's 7:30 a.m. Military installations, including the airfield in Rostov, are under our control. The aircraft go on schedule. There are no problems. We took control to prevent Air Force strikes against us, so the Air Force can continue attacks on the Ukrainians.
Tension between Wagner and the Kremlin's armed forces escalated during the Battle of Bakhmut, where the mercenaries played a crucial role in the drawn-out fight to capture the city. But Prigozhin accuses the Russian army commanders of withholding ammunition and other supplies from his men. More recently, Russia ordered Wagner mercenaries to sign contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry by the end of June. Russia's military leadership is accusing Prigozhin of carrying out an armed mutiny.
You must do this before it's too late. Obey the will and command of the elected president of the Russian Federation. Stop the convoys, return to bases and places where you're stationed.
Security in Moscow has been tightened. Military vehicles can be seen guarding government buildings in Russia's capital. Prigozhin says he commands 25,000 men, with more reported to be joining Wagner's ranks as they made their way into Rostov. While in St. Petersburg, police raided Wagner's headquarters. Michael Apple, Al Jazeera.
Well, we have 4 correspondents following this developing story. Jonah Hull will give us reaction from Kyiv. We'll also speak to him about the Russian airstrikes there. Ali Hashem is in Russian-controlled Donetsk. Sonia Gallego is following developments from London. But first to Yulia Shapovalova in Moscow. Yulia, what do you make of what we've heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Well, indeed, he spoke a while ago, and now we're getting some official reactions to his speech. We know that Foreign Ministry spokeswoman spoke about unity within the country. Well, it seems like there is a new form of expression of loyalty to Vladimir Putin and the Russian armed forces. Officials on their social networks write the name of the region or their organization with words, "We are with the president." So in his speech to the nation, Mr. Putin has said that Russia is fighting for its future and its identity. The authorities in Russia will not allow the country to be divided, and they will, of course, protect its people. He called the situation in the country internal betrayal, saying that any internal unrest is a deadly threat to the nation and to the state. And he also mentioned the conflict with Ukraine, saying that the entire Western military machine was directed against Russia. According to him, Wagner's fighters who participated in the special military operation in Ukraine are heroes, and now they shouldn't join the military rebellion, which is taking place right now in the country. Also, some Telegram channels associated with the Wagner group claim that there were some clashes with the Ministry of Defense in the Voronezh region, and military correspondents write right about the work of aviation along the M4 highway there, but we can't independently verify those reports. While the Ministry of Defense itself issued an official statement addressing fighters of the Wagner Group, saying that they had got involved in Prigozhin's criminal activities and participated in the armed rebellion. So they also guaranteed all fighters safety if they surrendered. And we also see that, according to some media reports, some fighters indeed returned to their initial positions as they had been asked by the army. However, according to various sources, since the first publications of Prigozhin's statements and his actions, there haven't been confirmations of like big clashes between Wagner and the regular army forces. And there are also reports that the Wagner Group now controls the command center and a number of security and military facilities in Russia's southern region of Rostov, including an airfield. But according to reports, military planes there continue carrying out their missions. So also there were reports about the situation in Voronezh, but we can't verify those reports either, that Wagner have captured facilities in Voronezh. So there were some pictures with Prigozhin negotiating with some high-ranking army generals, and we heard that they were warning Prigozhin about consequences of his actions.
And Yulia, we understand that security has been stepped up in the capital there.
Well, yes, absolutely. Indeed, it has. I mean, security has been tightened all over Russia. In Moscow, anti-terrorist measures have been taken and the police control the roads in and around Moscow. Several fighter jets were spotted in the Ryazan region. A huge traffic jam is now reported on the M4 Don highway in the Rostov and Voronezh regions. Hundreds of people have been stuck there since Friday evening. And there are also reports about armored vehicles on the roads of all those regions as well. So we understand that what is going on here right now is the tensions and the situation is really heating up. So we do continue monitoring the situation here.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, joining us now from Donetsk is Ali Hashem. Ali, what's happening in Rostov-on-Don as far as you're aware?
Well, since this morning, the statements from the Wagner Group about taking control of the central command in Rostov, and later on President Putin himself acknowledging that there is a problem in Rostov and that governing headquarters are blocked and there is a need for solving this problem, as he said. Now, why Rostov? Since yesterday, when Wagner's first statement came out, Wagner's commander Yevgeny Prigozhin claimed that the defense minister planned the attack on the attack on his forces from Rostov, and that he's going to march with his forces to Rostov to take revenge. And that's what happened, at least with respect to the Wagner Group being in the city. Now, there are no reports, as Yulia said, about resistance or clashes or any kind of military confrontations in Rostov. However, an affiliated Telegram channel with PMC Wagner posted a picture of a helicopter, a Russian helicopter, that they claim to have downed close to the Voronezh area. And this could be the first of its kind of a confrontation or an engagement between the Wagner Group and the Russian military, just in case this is confirmed. Now, on the other side, all roads surrounding Rostov are blocked towards Krasnodar, towards Donetsk, towards Voronezh. And these are measures that were taken by the local authorities in parallel with these developments.
And Ali, how could these developments shape the situation on the battlefield itself?
Well, Kerry, over here, for example, in Donetsk, we've been hearing since yesterday a lot of bombing, a lot of artillery coming in around the city. This could be related, and at the same time, the Ministry of Defense yesterday spoke about a new Ukrainian counteroffensive in the city of Bakhmut, building on what's happening inside Russia. So these are two main developments that we can talk about. Now, how this is going to impact the whole front line, it's also going to be important to understand who is really in control. We don't know who is in control right now. Now, Wagner chief says he is in the command in Rostov, in the central military command there. However, who is in direct control, this is not something that we know for now. This is also not going to impact only Russia's front line with Ukraine. As we know, Wagner Group has its mercenaries in several countries around the world, and they used to be described as Russia's arm in Africa, in Syria, in Libya. So this is also going to have a big impact on Russia's footprint around the world.
OK, for now, Ali, thank you. Well, meanwhile, there's been no pause in Russia's offensive in Ukraine. Let's cross live to Jonah Hull in Kyiv. So how is this Wagner development being viewed there?
It almost goes without saying, doesn't it, that Ukraine's political and military leadership will be watching extremely closely the way that these events are unfolding politically. We've heard from Mikhailo Podolyak, who's a senior advisor to President Zelensky, who points to what he described as obvious splits in the Russian elite. And he said events in Russia are just beginning, so they will have expectations that this has some way to go yet. Militarily, of course, there will be questions about how this could affect the overall course of the war, given how important Rostov-on-Don is as a military command post. It's the headquarters of the Southern Military District in Russia. It is where command and control is being exercised across much of the battlefield in Ukraine. And clearly, they will be wondering here the extent to which command and control is potentially going to be disrupted. But I think more specifically on the battlefield itself in Ukraine, they'll be looking for two things distinctly. The first will be the extent to which, and we can't answer this independently, the extent to which Wagner mercenary forces have been redeployed from areas of the battlefield where they have been active in order to head to Rostov-on-Don and other places, potentially vacating defenses in places like Bakhmut in the east of the country that they fought so hard to win control over, and therefore allowing Ukraine to redouble its efforts there. It is one of the pressure points of its counteroffensive. And the other thing they'll be looking for is the way in which Russian forces, traditional Russian forces, may also be redeployed in order to confront Wagner forces inside Russia. Russia is heavily extended inside Ukraine, some might say overextended. And if there are defences to be mounted in the country itself, they may have to find those on the front line. And Ukraine has been mounting probing attacks for weeks now in the early stages of its counteroffensive. It will have gained a pretty good idea of the way Russia's defences are laid out, and it will be watching closely to see whether any new spaces are opened up for them to probe further.
And Jonah, despite all of this, overnight strikes have continued where you are even.
Yeah, I'm sure you can see behind me. I'm in a pretty rubble-strewn parking lot of a high-rise apartment building here in Kyiv that was struck in the early hours of this morning. A reminder, of course, if one were needed, that the war very much goes on. Pieces, debris of some 20 cruise missiles that were fired at the capital, all brought down by air defences in what was a very noisy and active air defence night here in the capital, nevertheless struck this building, scything huge holes out of three sides of it, igniting a fire on 3 floors. 3 people are known to have died. Emergency service workers believe there could be more people under the rubble, and as we speak, people going through belongings that are strewn across the roadway here, looking at the wreck and rubble of cars. I can see items, personal items that have been blown out of apartment buildings. There's a pillow beside me here and what looks like some children's pyjamas. There would have been an air raid alert in place, of course, but frankly, these air raid alerts happen so often now in the early hours of the morning that quite a lot of people probably decide that they are safer in their apartments than having to spend night after night in underground bunkers. OK, that is the situation in Kyiv at the moment. We're going to continue with this and bring in Sonia Gallego, who's in London for us now. What's the reaction been from the British capital?
Well, there has been so far an intelligence update that's just been issued from the Ministry of Defence, where they've stated that in the early hours of the 24th of June, the Saturday, that the feud between Prigozhin and the Russian MOD has escalated into outright military confrontation. They've spoken about in this intelligence update about how the Wagner Group forces have crossed from occupied Ukraine into Russia, and in Rostov-on-Don, how Wagner has almost certainly occupied key security sites, and also how over the coming hours, it states in this intelligence update, the loyalty of Russia's security forces and especially the Russian National Guard will be key to how the crisis plays out. This represents the most significant challenge to the Russian state in recent times. That's the British Ministry of Defence giving its own intelligence update to the ongoing situation there. But so far there hasn't been any outright governmental reaction from this. I think the tendency is for there to be more of a very let's watch and wait to see exactly what is happening here, with the military intelligence keeping those abreast of the situation as to how this is going to be playing out. But it's going to be interesting to note going forward, depending on how it plays out, how this is going to affect not just how the British government responds to it as well, but also in the European Union. As let's not forget also that Wagner forces are all over the world as well, in Venezuela, in Syria, and right across Africa. You have some 33,000 troops stationed there as well. This is going to be a very interesting point, especially for France, who has seen countries across Africa who'd previously had ties with the French defence system there, to turn away from that and focus their ties to the Wagner group. It's going to be also a very interesting opportunity for France to be able to say, look, what's happening, what's playing out there. France can really be only your stable defence partner here. So it'll be interesting to see how that is going to be going forward in terms of how the situation on the ground in Russia and Ukraine is going to be playing out with the rest of the European Union.
Sonia Gallego, thank you for that. Well, with this fast-moving situation, Charles Stratford joins us now. He's on the road to Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. Charles, what can you tell us?
Yes, you're right. We are on the road to eastern Bakhmut. We've seen a lot of troop movements this morning. Bakhmut behind us. There's a lot of shelling that we're hearing as well. We've seen troop-carrying helicopters in the area. Of course, Bakhmut was pretty much the epicenter for Wagner's big push. It was where we saw Prigozhin make those repeated criticisms of the Russian Defense Ministry, criticizing them for not supplying enough arms. And it was the place really that Wagner was so instrumental in taking control of that city. So we've been speaking to Ukrainian soldiers in this area for their kind of reaction. Basically, morale amongst Ukrainian soldiers seems to have risen. They were very buoyed, the men that we spoke to. One man saying that they were now ready to exploit what he described as the chaos in Russia and push even harder. He said that in the last couple of weeks, since this counter-offensive has started, certainly around Bakhmut, the situation there, the progress made by Ukrainian forces in that counter-offensive has been slow, flanking attacks from the south, both the east and the west. He now said that they are going to push even harder. So it's going to be very interesting in the next 48 hours or so. And that's something that an ambulance man told us. There's a lot of ambulances positioned, as you can imagine, along this road, ready to take Ukrainian troops out. And he said, yeah, we're going to basically sit for 48 hours. But not to put too fine a point on it, we're very happy with the situation in Russia at the moment. And this kind of chaos is going to be exploited, we can imagine, by Ukrainian forces probing for weaknesses in Russia's defensive lines in the hours and days ahead.
Charles Stratford, thanks very much for that update.